All right, what's up, everybody? I had some technical difficulties getting that started. Oh, you guys don't need to see my closet. I am in a new place, and as you can see, not really set up for this, but I had some things that I wanted to talk about, and it's been driving me crazy, and I wanted to put it out there. I'm also not running on my usual internet, so I'm hoping that my connection isn't dropping like crazy. So far, it looks good. This isn't going to be a terribly long stream. Thank you. Glad that it looks and sounds good. That's the goal. I think we're properly adjusted. Let me fade the music down here a little bit. So, I don't even know where to begin tonight. I've got some things that are really I can't stop thinking about. We've got a lot of big things that have happened in pretty short order in the world at large in like a matter of a week, and it's just crazy. And I think like the first thing that I noticed today was effectively, Elon Musk buys Twitter, and he's fired half the staff, and we can meme about it and joke about it. But today he crossed a line that really bothered me. And he did so by actively making fun of and spreading nonsense and lies about a group of people who worked at Twitter before he owned it that created a small set of merch for Black Lives Matter. And he criticized this in a way that I found rather disgusting. And I got off Twitter. I posted my final tweet to both my personal account and the Average People Talking account because I don't want to participate. I don't want to be on a platform that he owns. It's trash. It's promoting the worst kinds of white supremacy, and I don't stand for it. That was kind of the first thing that was burning me up. And then, I've had some conversations, I guess we could say, and read some things lately that have been so frustrating in light of current events and facts. We had a shooting in Colorado carried out by an individual who, I mean, the details are limited right now, and I'm not going to speak on them. The only thing I can say for sure is I saw an interview with this individual's father, and the father more or less said, I'm paraphrasing, but it's as close to a direct quote. I mean, there's really no way to change what he said. There's no better interpretation of what he said. He basically, like, the news came to his dad and was like, hey, your son did this thing. He killed all these people at this nightclub. And his dad was like, yeah, when I heard about it, I was mortified. I was like, what's he doing at a gay nightclub? And then I was like, oh, thank God he's not gay. Five innocent people. 5 innocent people dead at the hands of your son, and you're just glad he's not gay? And when they asked about like what his views are, the father was very upfront about it. I'm a conservative, I'm a Mormon, I'm a Republican. And yet, how many people who claim to be on the left and claim to be in the realm of free speech and free thought and protecting love and individual freedom and liberty are going to turn around if I criticize religion as the primary cause of anti-LGBTQ ideology? They're going to call me the bigot. And you see this time and time again, especially if you do it in regards to Islam, which is the single biggest source of homophobic bigotry in the world, and a motherload of terrible ideas in regards to how we should treat homosexual people or people of alternate sexualities of any kind. And that's on my mind. And then I've had a lot of brush-ups with people on Facebook lately about my ideas regarding relationships. Some dust-ups where I've been, like, just misunderstood and accused of being a bigot for saying that I think that there's problems with the institution of monogamy. And then people are like, equate that with me having anti-LGBTQ views, as if the cultural practice of monogamy is a sexuality, and those two things are being completely conflated. People are just not making very good arguments. And then, rather than giving me the benefit of the doubt or asking for clarity, just tripling down on that and saying that, well, it's just a bad look and I have to somehow adjust my argument or think about how I'm approaching the topic because I come off as telling people that they're wrong for being who they are, which I never said. I said maybe they're wrong for thinking the thing they're doing is bringing them happiness. That's a very different claim. And that's frustrating. And it's all frustrating because I see this line that became crystal clear to me, and I want to tie it all together with this post that came from someone that I genuinely admire. And they shared it, and I don't know to what degree they find it serious. Let me find it really quickly. There is a way of sometimes not taking a meme that someone shares as very serious or gospel, as a perfect representation of what their views are. There's a way of not taking certain things to heart in this regard. However, I think it's really important to note that if you identified with it enough to share it, there are clearly points about it that you agree with. And this was the post that this individual shared. I no longer need hardcore proof to validate what my intuition tells me. If something feels off about a person, place, or thing, it's because something is off. I'm not sticking around to discover what it is. My time and my energy are way too valuable. I no longer need hardcore proof to validate what my intuition tells me. If something feels off about a person, place, or thing, it's because something is off, and I'm not sticking around to discover what it is. My time and my energy are way too valuable. That was the post that this person shared. Now, this person is an otherwise, again, admirable, loving, liberal person who is part of the LGBTQ community, has experienced some of those prejudices against them in their own life. But that's what I found so perplexing about it. Because what? Like, I no longer need hardcore proof to validate what my intuition tells me. Let's just take that first sentence. Like, yes, you do. Like, your intuitions are worthless without validation, without justification, without proof. Our intuitions are wrong all the time. That first sentence and the lines of reasoning that follow from it are how you got the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin situation. You might not like that, or that might not be a comfortable thing to think about, but that is what leads to that. When you can sit here and say, well, my intuition is saying that dude's bad news, you start down the path that leads you towards, in the end, running down someone who you think is bad news because you think you have some kind of moral obligation or duty to protect your neighborhood. Based on nothing. You just made an intuition about a person that you had no justification for, that you had no reasons to do this, right? And so when you post that and you say, if something feels off about a person, place, or thing, it's because something is off? No. That is where the hardcore proof to validate your feelings would be required, right? You don't just get to say that. You don't just get to assert that and have anyone accept that. Because if they did it about you, you'd be pissed. I am exhausted about when otherwise intelligent liberals think and talk this way. Otherwise really caring and loving liberals behave this way. and operate this way. You're guilty of the same sin you think you're trying to fix in the world. You're guilty of the same prejudice you're trying to eradicate in this world. And in the interest of mild self-defense of some recent criticisms I've gotten, I'll take it a step further and say, when you deal with my ideas in bad faith and accuse me of bigotry without actually asking me with a care to understand how I think about the issues I'm talking about, without actually diving into why I'm making the claims that I'm making, right? You're doing the same thing to me. You're saying that, well, something feels off about it, so my intuition tells me that you must be a bigot, because you couldn't possibly hold this position in the way that you're saying you do. You're insisting that you're not being a bigot. You're insisting that you're just, arguing this point. But something seems off, and my intuition's correct, so fuck you, I don't have to deal with your arguments. No, you don't get to do that. You actually have to make a counter-argument that makes sense if you want to get to truth. And, by the way, wanting to get at truth and caring that the people in your life do get at truth is the line between love and prejudice. That's the point of what I wanted to talk about tonight. When you think that this is why I actually talk about toxic monogamy, because there's this mentality that love conquers all. And that's sometimes falsely equated to love can look past anything and ignore certain things that it does not need to. Love is telling the truth. No matter how difficult, no matter how tough, no matter how scary it is. And by the way, it's also being open to finding out things that you feel like are true get corrected, because the only way that you get truth is by this method of argument and counter-argument and having things get proven wrong, and then you get to be more true. You get to find out maybe the truth was more than what you thought it was, and there's more to it than that, and to be nuanced. And I don't think this is landing with people, this connection. We've started to, I feel like in the younger generation, backslide into this mentality of, the individual has, super primacy, right? Where it's my feelings are the only thing that matter, it's all about me, everybody else can get fucked, I don't need to prove my intuitions to anybody, it's all about me, and that's great. And it's just not. You can't live on this planet by yourself. You're completely unable to survive the pressures of the world without your fellow person around you. And so when someone, even someone you vehemently disagree with, presents an idea, presents an argument, talks about something, when you disagree with it, right, it's not loving or kind or just to be something's off with that and I'm just going to reject it and ignore it and never talk about it again. It's cowardice. And it's avoiding the thing that both of you need to do to grow closer together, have a better relationship, get at truth. And we're just missing this whole thing. And I don't know if I'm connecting these ideas for you the way that they're all connected for me. But all of these things are linked to the same fundamental flaw in one's thinking. And that flaw is, I can be right by myself and my intuitions are correct. It's that first sentence in that post. I no longer need hardcore proof to validate what my intuition tells me. Well, if that's the case, then I guess Joseph Smith was right. His intuitions told him that God gave him some tablets in Missouri, and then he started a whole religion about that eventually a few years later, random dude in Colorado abuses the shit out of his son based on said Mormon ideas from some golden tablets in Missouri. Said son eventually kills 5 people in a club. If you don't think that whole chain of events comes back to one guy thinking his intuitions mattered more than they did, I don't know what you're talking about. And I don't think you know what you're talking about. One person's intuitions are not reasons to believe anything. They're not reasons to justify any kind of behavior. And you don't get to just throw them around like they make you special. Like, this is not a brag. And it's incredibly frustrating. Again, I have another friend, Yang Ganger, just to tell you what's burning on my mind today. Let me see if I can pull this up here. And we got into it on Facebook once again about my argument and my points regarding relationships. And it's really frustrating because, again, this is what I shared. And it goes with this whole theme. I shared a quote from Nietzsche that is, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. If you already shut off the show today, you're probably among this category. Sorry, not sorry. And I shared that with a caption of my own. And I said, like, for example, romance-based monogamous models of relationships are a failed project. Because that's one illusion that people don't like it when I attack it. And maybe I'm wrong. But you don't just get to call me a bigot and do what this person on my Facebook page did. You actually have to show why I'm wrong when I say that. The onus is on you to demonstrate how that model is working in some way that's benefiting society in some way that matters. And that was kind of my point of, I have 6 episodes on this channel about this topic, going over all of this in explicit detail. I put a lot of time and effort into it. It's my life's work. It's the most important piece of philosophy I think I've ever done. I tried to really redefine love as this concept that respects no limitations, right? And knows no limitations. What does it mean to truly give love and not expect anything back? What does it mean to love it with absolute freedom and impunity? What does it mean to give the most perfect thing you can give away? And what would a society look like if we were all actually making our best effort to do that? And would we have better models of relationships? Could we create models of relationships that allowed for that? That was the point. Like, this has always been love first, but listen to how it gets twisted. I posted that, and this person said, just because it doesn't work for you doesn't mean it doesn't work for others. Well, fair point, except that I didn't claim anything about whether or not it works or doesn't work for me. I made a point about societies at large. I'll remind you of the quote. Romance-based monogamous models of relationships are a failed project. That's like the big project. I thought that was clear. I guess not. So I replied and I said, but it demonstrably isn't working and never has. What in the universe would we call successful at a rate of 10 to 30%? And the reason, like, where does that number come from, Alex? Well, 10 to 30%. First of all, we know half of marriages end in divorce. How many relationships never get to marriage? How many relationships die that are so-called monogamous within the first 3 months of them starting? How many times do we overcommit promises to fidelity and then, like, we backwards rationalize that in society of, well, we weren't that serious, so I was talking to these other guys too, or these other girls too, and yada, yada, yada. Like, we pretend all the time that we're operating monogamously, even in so many cases where we're not actually acting monogamously. And that's been my point. Like, we're literally not even doing what we claim we're doing, which is why I think the whole thing is illusion. I think we're kidding ourselves. I think we've been lying to ourselves for a long time about this. And then people always, like, point out, like, as if you could find one couple that was monogamous forever, that would somehow, like, disagree with my point. No. The social norm and the social pressure is that everyone should be monogamous. And you can pretend that it's not that. You could be like, well, it's kind of normalized for some people to not be now. Is it really? Ain't no tax break for a polycule. No one asks you at work about how all your relationships are going. They ask you how your wife is. So to pretend that there's not this massive system of social enforcement around monogamy is infuriating. It's just dishonest. You're just not evaluating the situation in front of you with an open mind. That's what I wanted to do when I made my videos. And I did that. I was careful and meticulous to lay this out. So that's what I said. I said, what in the universe would we call successful at a rate of only 10 or 30%? And I'm including all the failed relationships out there, right? So this person responds, and what about those that are successful? Again, a non sequitur, because it wouldn't prove your point that it's a good model. Or even those that aren't, but would like to be. Are you anti-LGBTQ+? Are you anti-Semitic? Is it right to push your personal preferences on those who do not agree, such as those who prefer a single continuous sexual partner, which, by the way, was kind of an evolutionary necessity at some point to reduce the spread of illness? I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish. STD rates are up. Respiratory illness is up. You want us all swapping spit, cum, and sweat when we need to be keeping our germs consolidated, and monogamy actually can help. This might sound to some people out there like an incredibly good point. Everything about it is nonsense. First of all, I need to make this crystal clear, and I'm planning on doing an episode about this very concept. You don't have to just take this from me. There's a ton of videos out there. Okay? Sexualities are not the same thing as cultural practices. You can't be monogamous or polyamorous. That's not like a thing that you put in your bio. You're like, oh, this is me. I'm gay, I'm a metalhead, I'm a nerd, I'm a gamer, and I'm monogamous. We might say that so that we can, on a dating app, so that we can help people understand that what we're looking for, but that's not an identity. It's not like a fact about you that you are monogamous or you are polyamorous. It's merely a cultural practice. And you didn't get it from yourself, you got it from the culture you were born into. And surrounded by, and pressured into. Yes, pressured. I'm going to come back to that. So that's the first problem. I am not a bigot towards anybody that believes themselves to be monogamous. I think you're confused. I think you don't understand this, and I think that you should ask some questions and clarify some more things and think about it more. This is not something you are or are not. This is something you do or do not. And beliefs and actions are totally fair game for criticism. I will not criticize someone for immutable qualities about themselves, but this simply does not meet that standard. And I will say that from now until forever. This is not what we're talking about. Being a member of the LGBTQ community is most of the time based on some kind of immutable characteristic about yourself. Am I anti-Semitic? No, because, again, being Jewish is not an immutable characteristic, at least not in the way that we culturally identify it now, because it's more of a race than it is a religion in the way that it's talked about and practiced, even though it's really, we've confused the issue, I think, to some degree. And I think we'll be a lot less confused about it the more we be honest about our confusion. Now, here's the next question. Is it right to push my personal preferences on those that don't agree, such as those who would prefer a single, continuous sexual partner? Well, prefer it now because the culture tells them that that's probably going to be better for them. They've been told that since they were 3 years old in every Disney movie. And how do you know that that's what you prefer? There was a time in your life when you thought you preferred things, and then you discover new information later in life where you realize maybe I didn't prefer it at all. Preferences change. This is the whole problem about this, like, false equivalence between, like, gay and lesbian people and bisexual people. Like, oh, that's a preference. Yes, but that's a preference based on biological impulses that you literally can't change if you tried. No matter what you do, that's, like, not how your reproductive organs send signals to your brain. Like, you're attracted to what you're attracted to. This is not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about, do you like chocolate cake? And the cultural practices around chocolate cake. And it's fair game for evaluating whether or not it's good for us and whether or not it's good for society. I just hope that's super obvious even though it seems to keep coming up and I keep getting accused of this stuff by the same people who are like, love is love and we should be understanding, and then don't want to actually hear me out on this at all. Because they think I'm attacking them as people. They've allowed themselves to believe that they are monogamous. Like, that's a thing that you are. And it's just not. It's frustrating. This person went on to say some stuff about, like, STD rates and illnesses, and it's just, that's such a non sequitur and has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I need this to be clear, too. None of what I care about is sexual. Like, however you satisfy your sexual needs, whether you do it with one person only, you can, here's a crazy idea. Did you know that you can be poly, but still only have sex with one person? Alex, you're not making any sense. Well, if that doesn't make sense to you, you clearly haven't understood any of the arguments or any of the points that anybody who talks about this issue is making. You're not really wrapping your mind around the concept here. I'm talking about the standard of romantic relationships and the cultural pressures on how we're allowed to communicate with people that we could potentially be attracted to as foreseen by our partners or other people, right? If I'm only sleeping with one person, but I'm texting very, very romantic things to one person every single night, and if I do that for 2 years, every single night, even if I never sleep with that person, am I not operating polyamorously? So, like, this whole point about, like, disease is, like, this doesn't follow. What we need to do about disease prevention and spreading can sometimes overlap with our social practices, but they're just two separate problems to be dealt with individually. I'm talking about the well-being of our spiritual and our emotional life and how we socialize amongst ourselves. And that's because I want to live in a world with more love, not less. And monogamy is a restriction on love. It's a restriction on love. You can tell yourself any kind of story you want about it, but if you're making it all about sex, you don't understand my argument, and you haven't bothered to listen. So that was my response to this person. I said, the fact that you think it's all about sex is very telling to me. Most of my argument is about the structure and nature of relationships, and I spend very little time talking about sex. Further, your argument is so problematic and uninformed, I'm tempted not even to address it. For one, it's ahistorical. Polyandrous and polygamous societies have existed for ages. Other ape species participate in rampant examples of non-monogamous behavior. And even if neither of those were true, it would be a non sequitur at best and a deliberate straw man at worst. Disease spreading and illness and what to do about them are separate and irrelevant question as to how we should organize our social lives to maximize our well-being. They sometimes intersect and have to be prioritized against each other, but they're not caused by each other. Also, relationship structure is a cultural practice, and I've made this point over and over again. This individual, other critics of me, they don't seem to care about that fact. I am relentlessly anti-bigotry and anti-discrimination. Monogamous is not a group of people to be discriminated against. It's a thing that people do. This is nonsense when you speak this way. And if you're doing this to me, how many other people in your life are you doing this to, where you're mischaracterizing what they're trying to say, you're not giving them the chance to explain themselves, you're just shutting them down, deciding for yourself what they think, and then you're like, but I'm a super loving person. We're not progressing on any important conversations. I'm using mine as an example because it's the one that's frustrating to me the most about something that I tend to disagree with the average person. Every singular point that I make on the way to my conclusion, which is interesting to me. Why is that? Turns out, same would be true if you sat down with a lot of the people who disagree with you that you're trying to turn into an enemy. This comes back to the episode that I did about villains and heroes and that hero-villain narrative we create for ourselves. We gotta have a bad guy in every story. No, you don't. There are just, sometimes people are wrong. And you have a conversation and they realize, you know what, I could have been less wrong about that. And then going forward, they're a lot better because now they don't have to be wrong anymore. We need to do more of that. We need to stop doing, I don't need proof, and I don't need validation, and I don't need justification. We need to do a whole lot more of the proof and the justification and the validation. Um, and if I need any more proof of this, rather than deal with anything I've said so far or make a single point of constructive with one of my other critics, dude, you are the village idiot in my Facebook chat. Okay, man. I'm sorry you think that way. This person went on to tell me that polygamy and monogamy comes down to social contracts based on needs or religious beliefs, more or less. All right, sure. Okay. Yes, but like, this person's stating that as like it's an argument, and it's not. It has nothing to do with what I said. Then they went on to say, I don't really think monogamy is the problem if there are, like you mentioned, entire societies based around it. My whole point is, societies that tried to base themselves around it haven't had any success doing so. There was a goal in mind, and that's most people would be able to do this successfully, and yet it turns out they can't. That's just, whatever. It's frustrating. Then they went on to say that a bunch of stuff that just has nothing to do with the conversation. And then social contracts are solely between the members of said contract. However, in a polygamous society, you really have to bring something to the table in terms of providing for well-being if you only have to provide satisfaction in one or two areas rather than an entire spectrum of needs. In monogamous relationships, people are more willing to settle if someone is lacking in one or two areas, as long as most other needs are being met, because the odds of finding another mate which can provide satisfaction across the spectrum is daunting. Interesting. That sounds a lot like my argument for breaking down monogamy norms. Like a lot like my argument for breaking down monogamy norms. Like the fact that we're trying to settle and calling that love or maximizing well-being, like, think about the language this person just used to defend their point. I mean, they're making it so much weight. They made my argument for me. The whole reason that we should open our minds about this is because finding one close relationship that can provide for all of our needs is daunting. So why are we limiting ourselves to just one? Like, it doesn't make any sense. We've only been trying this experiment for 300 years. This romantic monogamy construct that is most easily identified as the escalator model of relationships. And we've failed miserably to achieve the results that most people think should be what we're going for. Like, we just fail over and over and over again. Everyone has a story about being cheated on. Everyone is constantly paranoid about their partner. Everyone is constantly in this world that pits us against each other. Instead of being more forgiving and more loving and understanding and having more open communication and allowing for a flirt here or there, or maybe even some kind words to be exchanged between you and another person, like, we're not thinking about it. We're just all about, like, the second I feel insecure, that's your problem. The second I feel nervous, that's your problem. The second I feel jealous, that's your problem. And we push all that onto somebody else instead of ever working on ourselves. And I'm the jerk for pointing it out. I'm sorry if that's how you feel. But, I mean, it turns out you do have an obligation to work on yourself and be a better member of your social group. That's a real obligation that you have. And I'm not going to back down from that. Our quality of interpersonal relationships has plummeted. I've talked about this a whole bunch. We have the least amount of close friends we've ever had. We have the lowest success rates of long-term relationships. Not just romantic ones. All long-term relationships. People aren't maintaining relationships with family anymore. Friends that they've had for numbers of years. We let these things fall apart. And yet we need them to survive. No one can do this life alone. No one can survive this planet alone. We need each other. This is a fundamental conflict that has to be resolved. You can't get away from this fact. And so ignoring it or just dismissing the whole thing isn't getting you anywhere. No one's bothered to ask me these questions. No one has bothered to watch my videos and find out what's your problem with monogamy. Like, what is the problem you're trying to solve for? In every single one of these conversations, it's assumed that I have some ulterior motive, and usually that motive that people think is sex. I hate to break it to you, world, I can count my number of sexual partners on this many hands in my entire life. This is not just because I want to fuck everything that moves. I'm genuinely trying to improve the human connection and condition and find more love in a world that so badly needs it. We have a white supremacist running Twitter. We have people dying in our clubs that are supposed to be our safe places for people who'd think a little bit outside the box and act a little differently. Because their parents were oppressive pieces of shit based on their shitty religion that nobody has the guts to call out for being what it is. Because you can't criticize their religion, you must hate the person if you hate their religion. No, I hate bad ideas in all their forms, and I love you enough to tell you why your idea sucks. It is that simple. The line between love and prejudice is truth. The line between love and prejudice is truth. The line between love and prejudice is having the guts and the courage to speak the truth and be willing to have truth spoken to you. Negotiate these differing, contradicting thoughts. Have those conversations, no matter how difficult they are, with the people around you that you love. And negotiate that until one of you realizes what you're getting wrong or what your contradiction is. And that way, more truth can be had. It's the most satisfying experience in the world to find out that someone you really care about made a point about your behavior that you really needed to change. That you really, really needed to consider as kind of shitty. Like, for example, I'm just going to blow someone off if they give me icky vibes. Like, this person who posted it, once again, is a member of the LGBTQ community. I'm coming back to this original post. I no longer need hardcore proof to validate what my intuition tells me. If something feels off about a person, place, or thing, it's because something is off. By the way, same justification that all of Christendom uses to justify their treatment of gay people. They're a little weird and icky to me, so I just don't associate with them. What's different here? People accuse me and my views on relationships of, like, what's different about that when I criticize the institution of monogamy. Isn't that the same as criticizing homosexuality? No. This post is the same as the bigotry against homosexuals. This post. Truth means you have to have uncomfortable conversations. Means you have to be willing to be wrong. Means you have to hear things that contradict your current worldview. It means you have to be open to the idea that people mean what they say and have the intentions that they have when they deal with you in good faith. And you owe it to them to deal with them in good faith as well. If you're not asking people why they think how they think and trying to get to the bottom of it and trying to figure out if maybe you're the one that's wrong, you're just trying to prove to them why you're right, that's not love. That's prejudice. I want to say that again. If you go into conversations and you start from the position of, let me convince you why you're wrong and I'm right, and why you don't know what you're talking about and why I'm so much holier than thou, that ain't love. That's prejudice. No matter how right you think you are about the issue. You could be on the right side of the most obvious issue on planet Earth, right? But if you go into the, like for example, you go to a person who's in the KKK, and you're like, actually, black people are human beings too. But your only goal is to just tell them that until they, like, believe it, or, like, I don't know what you think that's going to do, because it's not going to work. And your goal isn't to find out, what if I'm wrong about that? What if they're actually the ones who are right? Guess what? That's still prejudice. You actually have to contend with their ideas. I know that sounds weird, but it's really not that weird. I mean, with that one, it's just super easy because their ideas are so obviously flawed. You point out the contradictions, and you have a better conversation. We will not progress. We will not go anywhere as a species, as humankind, if we can't do this. If we can't choose love over prejudice. And that means being willing to listen and not speak. Being willing to let people put their whole idea out there. I'm very, very critical of the deplatforming of Kanye West. I'm sorry. That was the other thing that's like been on my mind lately. Banning Kanye from things and acting like that is not going to make anti-Semitism go away. And if you think that, you're a fucking idiot. Like, I don't know. Like, oh, good, there's no more anti-Semites now. We banned Kanye. What? No, you want to kill anti-Semitism, let them put their ideas out there in public to be criticized. Don't hide it. Don't sweep it under a rug and shove it under a table. We have to have difficult conversations, or we can't get to more love. Kanye is someone who his entire life has been misunderstood, mistreated for a myriad of reasons. Maybe if he had just been shown enough love and better treatment, he'd think differently. And maybe not. But what other tool you got? What other tool you got? I don't know what one there is. We have to be able to have tough conversations with people who disagree with us, explore ideas as ideas, and stop attaching ideas to people. Just like people do when they don't understand my point and they think I am monogamous. No, you're not. You think monogamy is a good way to maximize well-being and happiness, and we can talk about it. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe you are. And if you came into the conversation with me as automatically I was wrong before it even got started, well, then that's not love, it's prejudice, and I'm going to keep saying it. It's the whole point of this episode. Imagine if we were able to have these difficult conversations about the existence of a God, whether or not monogamy is good for society, the actual reasons for pro-choice versus pro-life. Does it not land with people that some issues we've made massive strides on? Like, for example, no one in this day and age is going to question the validity or the morality of interracial marriage. But gay marriage? That's being challenged every day. That's being put on the chopping block every single day. Why haven't we made progress? It's because it's easier to just villainize our opponent, act like they hate us, pretend they think things they don't think, mischaracterize their position, rather than address it in reality. Rather than go to them with love and an open mind and be genuinely interested if we're the ones who are in the wrong. If so far all your arguments have stood up to every challenge, well, then have a little courage. They probably will again. Have the courage to make them. Have the courage to actually make your point and not just paint somebody else as a bigot, because that's easy. And if it was easy to solve these problems, we wouldn't have these problems. That's how problems work. I'm fired up tonight, man. Ugh. It's frustrating. It just seems like I'm sitting on a train watching this train wreck of failed human cooperation over and over and over again. And we're not solving any of our problems because we have our friends in our ears through social media, like ramping us up, telling us, hey, you know what? If you can just get enough people to agree with you, that's better than an argument. It doesn't matter how many people agree with you. You could still be wrong. Even if everybody in the world, if there was one racist left, and everybody else in the world was an anti-racist, the racist could still be right. It's the arguments that actually determine who's right or wrong. We have to work it out. And we have to do so in good faith, that we have a shared common goal of a better humanity. That's what makes the project worthwhile of living on this planet. Quite frankly, there are two paths out of conflict, either conversation or violence. I've talked about it a bunch of times. And every time you choose this route of painting someone as a bigot, you are... And if you don't believe me on that, why don't you try having a conversation with me instead of painting me as a bigot? And just see what happens. I bet it's a more satisfying experience for both of us. The final point that we got to, I'll let you know where I left it with this individual who I think just decided that they didn't need to continue to communicate with me. I said to them, the incredible part is while you once again completely ignored my statement and argument, you actually made it for me. Finding one close relationship that can provide all of our needs is daunting. Therefore, we shouldn't limit ourselves to just one. My point has been that for roughly 300 years, societies have attempted to base themselves on romantic monogamy and failed miserably to achieve the desired result of quality interpersonal relationships. All this while the quality of interpersonal relationships plummets to all-time lows in every measurable way. You haven't bothered to ask me why I think monogamy is the problem. You're just insisting I'm some kind of bigot based on people's, quote, personal choices. So here's the uncomfortable question I leave you with tonight. Did all of the South choose to embrace Christian cultural practices? And is that simply just some kind of social contract between the people who live in the South? Are all the Hindus in India not eating cows? Are they doing that as willing participants and that's just a social contract between them? Or are there other forces of tradition and influence and child rearing at play? Our culture and our social contracts are forced onto us. They're imprinted onto us. We're not just participating them in some kind of voluntary system where we just opt out of some of them. They're constantly reinforced. If all of those peoples were just merely willing participants, there wouldn't be any conflict around it. They're heavily influenced by major social consequences to think and act a certain way, and it completely ignores power imbalance of tradition and social enforcement. And we have had a tradition and social enforcement and reinforcement of romantic monogamy from the time you were 3 years old until forever, for generation after generation after generation, without anyone daring to ask about, is this good, or what are the results, or are there problems? And when you try to point out the problems, people defend it like they're defending a religion. It's not really the religion. It's not really see, the problem with the doctrine of Islam isn't really the doctrine of Islam. It's just that there's a few bad apples out of the 1.5 billion people. So we'll ignore the fact that in virtually every majority Muslim country that still has some semblance of their theocracy left, they're still throwing gay people off of rooftops because of their religion. This is a real world problem. And we don't just get to dismiss it. It's the same reason why that kid went into that club. Because he was abused and raised by a monster who thought it was a bigger problem that his son would be gay than to kill 5 people. We've got to recognize the real thing we're dealing with here. We have wars of ideas, and the best ideas need to win. And that dies when you shut down people who disagree with you and don't give them a chance to say their piece. And refute that with your better argument. The best way to deal with bad arguments is make a better one. Period. And doing anything less isn't love, it's prejudice. You've prejudged that person. You've determined they're not worth your time. They're not worth your energy. In fact, well, look, it says it in this post. It's because something is off and I'm not sticking around to discover what it is. My time and my energy are way too valuable. Well, I'm glad it's not worth your time. This is immaturity. Emotional immaturity. Intellectual immaturity. We don't live in this world where you get to do that. You're just privileged enough to have it not directly happen to you. Because I challenge you to think about it. The victims of the families of this shooting at the club in Colorado would probably all have much rather we lived in a society where the free criticism in the public square of shitty religious ideas about sexuality wasn't just allowed, It was encouraged as a cultural norm and practice to avoid these kinds of things. Because then maybe, just maybe, if that had happened only 50 years earlier, at some point along the way in this generation, that father would have realized there's absolutely nothing wrong with their son being gay or non-binary or different in any way, and maybe certain abuses wouldn't have happened, and maybe this person wouldn't have had the mental issues that they did have, and then maybe 5 people would be alive today. There is a chain of causation here that all has to do with we're too chicken shit to call bad ideas where they stand. And that's not love, it's cowardice and prejudice. And that is the point that I wanted to get across tonight. I hope it made sense. I hope you enjoyed it. Apparently, you know what? I'm going to call you out, fuckface. Christian Taff. Village idiot. Prove me wrong. Actually, make a counter argument to this whole episode. I have a Discord. I have a public channel. I have a public Facebook. You can message me, whatever you want. You think I'm a village idiot? Let's hear you do better. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful night.